around being leaky gut syndrome. I told you, we're going to hammer gut hard. Literally, this means that we have a porous gut, or that we have holes in our intestines. You don't literally have a hole in your intestine, but you think about the microscopic size of some of the things that you take into your body, and the body should normally be able to kind of regulate what passes through. If you have any hole larger than it should be, stuff can start leaking through there that shouldn't be there. So anything passing through the gut can be absorbed across. We start seeing large undigested bits of food. The body should be able to recognize things like protein, carbohydrates, and fats. That's what our body's created to run on. But when we start having huge, big molecules of these things come through without being broken down, then you start developing food sensitivities and cross-reactivity, which can lead to, obviously, food sensitivities and allergies, but it can also lead to autoimmune disease, where your body will actually come after and attack your own tissue because it looks similar. Foreign invaders, as I showed you in the picture here a little while ago, foreign invaders can get across more easily. So your bacteria, your parasites, and your fungi, and your viruses. And toxins can as well. So all kinds of things that we don't want in our system getting through into our system. This is a very involved picture. I'm just going to walk you through and give you the very simple explanation. So we see here stress, medications, enzymes, all types of things that will break down these cells that make up our barrier in our intestine. So that allows things to just kind of leak through here like this. Rather than being tight and closed, they just leak through. We start having our immune cells here that see these. They're like, these aren't supposed to be here. This shouldn't be this should not be within circulation. This should be either broken down further, or it should have been passed through. So they start releasing chemicals saying, hey, we got this stuff down here that shouldn't be here. And then the natural progression of this is that we start breaking down even further, because the body is now creating an immune reaction to the cells of our intestine. So really what happens is it just kind of is a cycle, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. A lot of people are walking around with leaky gut syndrome and don't know it. Lots and lots of people. So there's specific testing you can do for it to kind of identify if you do or not. But go look on the internet, do some research on leaky gut syndrome. It's all over the place, and it's becoming much more researched in the literature. So very important stuff. The result of this, as I've kind of alluded to already, is we have malabsorption. So not only are things getting through, but we're not getting good things through. Things like our nutrients and vitamins. So they're just kind of being harmlessly passed through and not being properly absorbed. We can also develop a thing called dysbiosis, which is where we have good normal bacteria that should live in our intestine. When we have dysbiosis, we have the good bacteria disappear and the bad bacteria become more prevalent. Or things like yeast infections, or we have parasites living within our digestive system. So we have dysbiosis is essentially an imbalance of life in the intestines. So we have too much of something and not enough of another thing. We have too much bad and not enough good. Microbial overgrowth, that's pretty much what dysbiosis is. We have an overgrowth of bad bacteria and an undergrowth of good bacteria. So we can also develop immune reactions because of those particles that are leaking through. We start having immune reactions to anything. I have a good friend, I'll just tell you a story real quick, that I went through school with. He went through a very stressful time in our last year of school. He had some marital problems, ended up getting a divorce. And during this time, he was eating a lot of chicken. He was trying to eat healthy, trying to help maintain his body. He's eating a lot of chicken, eating a lot of fish, eating a lot of rice, good stuff that we should normally be able to eat. He developed immune sensitivities to almost all these foods because with the stress, his gut and barriers started breaking down and started leaking through. He started developing reactions to these. So this happens over periods of time when we're very stressed, any type of stress. So this is not just happening to people who are immune deficient. This is happening to fairly healthy people. This guy, going through chiropractic school, pretty healthy guy. So immune and sensitivity reactions, and this, like I said, it's just a vicious cycle that keeps on repeating itself and making itself worse. Exhausting the immune system. So if we have somebody who has chronic recurrent infections, when I first started here, I saw a baby. He was just turned 1 year old and had been on, I believe, 25 courses of antibiotics from the time he was born because of recurrent ear infections. He hadn't had more than a week without an ear infection since he'd been born. So this type of thing where we have an environmental stressor, a weakened immune system, we have an exposure to some sort of organism that shouldn't be there, we get an infection, and immune system damage. One infection usually doesn't do a whole lot to us, but when we have something that allows us so that we keep on getting exposed to it, and we aren't developing good intestinal bacteria, we aren't having good barrier mechanisms, it's just going to keep going like this. And it's just going to keep on getting worse with each cycle. That's why I hate it when people are sick all the time. I have some good friends that I would love for them to be able to hear this and know what they can do to help themselves, because they're sick, it seems like every other week sometimes. So, and I bet you know a lot of people like this too. And it's just unfortunate these people their quality of life is suffering. So, something else with exhausting the immune system, cancer development. We see all these cells that are going through and they're gobbling up cancer cells so that we don't have any growth. All of us have cancer growing in our body right now. But those of us who are healthy, the immune system is going through and taking care of these. We don't have any expression of symptoms. The body just takes care of it and moves on. When we start really overdoing it, that's when we start actually developing symptoms or pathological types of cancers. So we have, some people have a genetic predisposition. They're more inclined to get cancer because of their genes, but not everybody. And genes, I seem to talk about this in every single workshop. Genes are only about 30% of what you're actually going to express. Environment is 70%. So if you put yourself in a good environment, you're going to have better genetic expression. Interesting study done on twins. They take two identical twins with the same genes, expose them to different stresses, or they look at them and see what stresses they've been exposed to over a period of time, and one of them can be completely healthy, the other one can be cancer, autoimmune disease, just all types of things going on. You're like, what happened here? Well, it has to be the environment. They have the same genes. Why is one healthy and one's not? The field of study is called epigenetics. Again, something interesting to kind of look up and do some research on, because it's, again, becoming more and more recognized in the medical literature. So, but cellular distress, we talked about all the stresses that we can be exposed to. It's going to change the genetic makeup of the cells. And then we're going to have mutant cells reproduced. And that's when you just kind of get this balloon effect, and they just keep on reproducing, and the body can't keep it in check anymore. So, as I said, unchecked growth of cells, and cancers begin to develop. A lot of people don't think about the fact that your immune system is what battles cancer. That's why I wanted to talk about this. That's why it's important, not only just, like I said, for your infections, it's important for your cancers and autoimmunity. Autoimmunity is something that's becoming more and more prevalent in the United States and really around the world, but unfortunately more in developed countries, because I believe it's really a disease of affluence or a disease of lifestyle. As I said, environment really affects a lot of this, because we can have genetic predispositions, but you don't have to express those symptoms. When we look at this, this is again kind of a Th2 dominance, and I would argue that cancer probably is a Th2 dominance too, or where we have too much antibody production. We don't have enough of the natural killer cells that just go around and gobble up these cancers, gobble up these abnormal cells that are being reproduced. So again, kind of a Th2 dominance, which, like I said, goes along with vaccinations too. Vaccines are Th2 dominant. So strong tie-in with barrier function. As I talked about with leaky gut, we have molecular mimicry or cross-reactivity. One of the big things we see, everybody's heard about gluten, right? Gluten's the devil, yeah? Gluten is a part of wheat that is becoming more and more of a problem in our society today, because so many people are becoming sensitive to it. And gluten can actually mimic your different cells of your neural cells, so different parts of your brain. It can mimic thyroid tissue. When people have autoimmune thyroid, a lot of times the body thinks it's attacking gluten that shouldn't be in your body. It's really attacking your thyroid. And it can attack all types of different things. Your myelin that goes around your nerve cells. They're even speculating now that it could possibly be one of the causes of diabetes, type 1 diabetes. So, very interesting stuff with the immune system and autoimmunity. Here's some examples. I just kind of named a few of them off. Celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, Graves' disease, Hashimoto's, which is the thyroid disease, scleroderma, diabetes, Guillain-Barré syndrome, lupus erythematosus, MS, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, myasthenia gravis, and pernicious anemia. And this is just a few of them. There's so many autoimmune diseases out there, and you do not want to get one of these diseases. So this is why it's very important to maintain and enhance your immune system where you can, which is what we're going to talk about now. This is the good part. So what can I do to make it better? I use this slide. It's from my stress presentation that I do. And it really goes, it says stress, but it could say immune system. This is Dr. Hans Selye, and he was really the father of stress and stress research. And he said stress is not necessarily bad for you. It's the spice of life, and any emotion, activity causes stress, but of course your system must be prepared to take it. That's the part I want you to take away from this. If your immune system is ready to take whatever is coming into your body or whatever your cells are doing, you're going to be fine. Okay? It's when your body is not prepared to take it, that's when you start developing symptoms and problems. So, optimizing the nervous system function starts at birth. Breastfeeding. They've strongly tied breastfeeding. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends women breastfeed 6 to 12 months. Most kids aren't getting that these days. And because of that, their thymus isn't developing properly, which the thymus is what helps to develop your T cells. Remember what I said, that your body starts developing sensitivities to different antigens when you're in the first few months of being born? This is why. Your thymus is developing. Your thymus is saying, these cells we want to keep, these cells we don't want to keep. If you see any of these cells, take care of them. If you see any of these cells, leave them alone. Those are ours. Maternal antibodies. This is where the baby is actually taking in antibodies from the mom when they're nursing. And concurrently, and I just realized this as I was doing some research on this, is that the baby's also exposing mom. So if the baby's been exposed to something that mom hasn't been exposed to, she's going to start developing more antibodies, and then she's going to again pass the baby better antibodies through breast milk at a later feeding. So I thought that was very interesting. And also with breastfeeding, unless mom's skin is entirely clean when she breastfeeds, there's going to be some exposure to bacteria that lives on the skin, which is good for the baby because more than likely mom doesn't have anything that's going to cause any huge serious diseases in the baby on her. And it's just going to give the baby a chance to get some exposure and start developing some immunity itself to some of these more, not as dangerous types of diseases. So, something else in babies, natural passage to the birth canal. That is very strongly developing a T1 type of response, or a Th1 type of response. Because the baby's going to be exposed to bacteria, and it's going to start developing those responses right away. So very important. Something else, and this is just something that kind of goes along with vaccinations, and I encourage people to do some research into, is passing on vaccines, or at least delaying the schedule. You think about how many vaccines our kids get. Dr. Martins knows the number, and he rattles it off all the time. But there's something like 40 courses of antibiotics by the time a kid is 6 months old, to I think 10 or 12 different organisms. And it's just kind of crazy because they'll a lot of times give them a lot of doses in one single vaccine or in the same day. So that's why if you can delay the schedule or just pass on ones you know you don't need, Hep B, they don't need that when they're first born. You know, they're not going to be doing anything promiscuous or playing with needles. So that's something that can be passed on. But delaying the schedule, being like, I don't want my kid to get 10 vaccines here today. Let's just do one. We'll come back in a month, see how they do. We'll do the next one. Delaying it, spreading it out. Just another option if you are still interested in doing vaccinations. So MVIC has a lot of good information about those, which is a resource on the page I gave you. Proper nutrition for developing children. Have you guys seen what kids eat these days? It's bad. And unfortunately, it's loaded up with lots of chemicals. It's very nutrient poor. If you look at the food, if you look at the labels, most of it isn't food. It's chemicals. Or it's parts and aspects of food kind of put together to make something that looks like food. So, not giving kids a very good start with their nutrition. So, and nutrition, of course, with the gut goes very strongly with our immune system, development of our nervous system, just development overall and in general. So.